So it underwent committee, Jeff. It's concurrent public review. It's out there. It is going, and we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that because I know that's a big piece of, I don't want to say concern, but angst. How about that? So what's important? So these things right here are very important. These are the things that we help draft. And one of the ones I'm very much proud of to be part of that I help draft. I am not a water scientist. I'm not a PhD expert in this. But what I do know is I know our people, I know our processes, and I know what it takes to run a department. So I was part of the multidisciplinary team committee recommendation roles and responsibilities chapter. So that chapter alone said who does what, how to do it, when to do it, why to do it. And that's more important because a lot of people think 108, you just throw it out there and all of a sudden you got to be compliant. And I can tell you right now, it is not hard, but it's not easy. And there's another document coming out we're going to talk about later, a companion document that's hopefully will come out this year, early maybe next year, to teach you how to implement 108. But the most important thing is most healthcare facilities have a water committee already because they deal with either laboratory, dialysis, Legionellas. There's already a water committee that they already have to have, and that is required by the state and also regulatory. So this just needs to fit up underneath there as one of the chapters in the water committee. Now we just need to understand our roles in there, and that's all in 108. 108 tells you that. Then we talk about the water categories because a lot of people go, oh, I got DI, I got RO, I'm good. Not necessarily. DI and RO don't necessarily mean you have the new water category, which we defined as critical water. Critical water has a defined set of characteristics and values associated with that. So because you have DI, RO, are you maintaining it the right way? Is it set up the right way? Is it feeding your different areas the right way, which we'll talk about? Just because you have it doesn't mean you're in compliance, and we'll get in that. So you need to look and understand where you're at with that. Then we're going to talk about water quality for mechanical washers and monitoring requirements, which is crazy, and then quality monitoring. How often, when do you do it, all that good stuff. Now, the one thing I do want to talk to you guys about is what's really cool about 108 is special considerations. So we all have construction. Oh, my facility here in Loveland, Colorado is building another whole hospital wing. And out of nowhere, what they did just this last week is I got a call, and I'm here working from home this week. I got a call saying that the construction caused a break in one of the steam lines, and we lost steam. We lost steam to the entire sterile processing because of someone just didn't know what the line was, and when they tried to tap into it or whatever they're doing on the construction side. So then they're like, okay, well, we'll get it back up in a short lead and we'll figure it all out. No, it's not that easy. So when you lose steam or you lose water due to construction, it teaches you, 108 teaches you all the things you need to do when they get you back online. It's not just simply turning off and turning on the spigot. There's things that you need to do, no different than if you have a major repair of an autoclave. There's things you need to do to make sure you're in compliance with your water quality. We also have boil alerts. Now, we don't have this too much in Colorado, but the East Coast, Georgia, I know you're no example. You're not immune to weather events and hurricanes and floods, and Louisiana and Texas, even to a certain point down south. When you have those kind of events, you might lose city water and you might go on a boil alert. So what does that do for you and your hospital and your water? This is discussed in this document. Interruptions of service are also back in the same thing. So what does interruptions of service mean? Again, whether it's a city water, sometimes city water goes out because they're doing some maintenance too. So how do you handle that? We talk about that. And then obviously the standard repair maintenance routine, because these critical water systems need to be maintained. They need to be upkept. It's not, you just don't turn it on and forget it. They got to be sanitized. There's stuff that has to do. So how do you work that around your system? Now, with 108, there's one key takeaway that I want to give everybody is don't panic when someone says you need to follow. Even Joint Commission's giving some runway for people to follow. As long as you're not doing nothing. If you're doing nothing and you're just going, I'm good, and you're covering your eyes, you're probably going to find some difficult conversations. But the first thing you should do is you should get a baseline. And what I mean by get a baseline is get a baseline of your water and steam. And there's 4 main areas that is recommended. One is your your final, well, one is your sink, and there's 2 spots in the sink. You should know your tap water, your initial rinse, which does not need to be critical, but that'll tell you what you're at. That's the stuff coming in from your central utility plant or your town or your city. So know what that is. So you can get a sample of that, or your water company can, or your instrument or your mechanical washer or repair company can. Your hospital needs to set up a policy on who tests, but get your initial rinse water. Then at your sink, you should have a final rinse water, and that should be critical, especially for your hand wash items or your like eye instruments or things like that. So your sink is your first water sample, both tap and final rinse. And final rinse should be critical. So it's 2 separate samples, but it's the same area. Your next one is going to be your washers. You want to check your final rinse at your washers, because your final rinse should be critical water at your washers. So you want to know what your washers are now doing at the final rinse. And if you have a cart wash, by the way, that has an instrument cycle, you'll need to test your cart washer, because again, that's coming from a different feed. So those areas right there are very crucial areas to understand your water quality. Now we're going to jump over to steam, and there's 2 areas in steam. 2 areas in steam are your steam quality. And again, there's a whole section in there about your steam quality. And there is a specific test or a specific way of getting the sample that your autoclave repair technician or company will know how to do. So you need to work with them, but that'll tell you your quality of your water. And I'll give you some good examples of why that's so important. And then next, you need to check your steam dryness. And people are like, steam dryness? Well, do you have dry steam, wet steam? What's going on? Because if you start having staining issues, black flakes, pitting, any of those issues we've all heard around the news, where's it coming from? Is it coming from your sink? Coming from your washers? Coming from your sterilizers? Is it quality? Is it the steam dryness? We don't know until you know a baseline. And what happens is if you don't have a baseline and you start to have problems, where do you start? So a good example is, I'll just tell anybody this. If I go to the doctor and I said for my annual physical, and he goes, I'm going to put you on blood pressure medications. I'm like, okay, well, is my blood pressure good? Oh, we haven't taken it yet. Well, then why would you put me on blood pressure medicine? Why, if you don't know my blood pressure or my cholesterol or anything, why would you put me on something that you think I need without knowing my baseline? So why would you want to change anything in your water system or do anything different to your water system or your steam if you don't know your baseline? So know your baseline. Get initial samples from those, have them documented, have them submitted to your water quality management program, and then your head step of everybody else. Then if you see some variances that are different from the national standards in 108, then you contact a water quality expert through one of the various companies and go, we're here, we need to get here. How do we do that? And they will give advice to the committee and to you and to your senior management, and you can do that. It's not, you don't necessarily need to replace your whole system, refit everything, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. You just need to understand where you're at and where the differences are at. And sometimes you might be just off just a fraction, which is not a patient safety issue. Maybe it's some small steps you need to take somewhere in the facility or somewhere in your department, but you don't know that until you don't have a baseline. And the second thing about having a baseline, like I said, if you start to have issues where people are like, ooh, what's going on here with this and that, you can resample and say, well, I originally had this baseline. I took a new sample and, oh, I see I'm way out of whack. Or, nope, it's the same, so it's not this. So I can now not focus on that. I can focus on another area. Because a lot of people blame a lot of things, but until you know your baseline and your resample, it really doesn't matter. So I hope that helps. That's the big takeaway from the water quality. Very simple. Get your 4 samples, get your baseline, compare that to 108, and then come up with a plan if you need a plan based off what's in that document. So I hope that's helpful for you. The next document is AAMI TIR 99, which is your dilators, transesophageal echoes and ultrasounds, all kind of things like that. So the guidance is appropriate because these things are used often not in sterile processing departments. They're used in CV labs. They're used in ERs. They're used in interventional radiology. They're used in OB. So who's doing this work? So we knew this was a gap. Some of them are sent to sterile processing, some of them are not. So it gives that guidance on exactly which direction they should take, what they should do, and it really does help cover. So it's different than ST Set 91, which is for endoscopes, because this is a different beast. That's actually called out differently than this. And there's a lot of discussion on this during the document as far as sheaths and not sheaths and sterile, not sterile. It's in that document. So that's what's very important about, excuse me, this document and moving forward. Let me take a sip of water real quick. Thank you all. All right. Now, what the key highlighted areas to cover in this is probes, covers versus what they call condoms. And this is again on page 10. Covers of sheaths are FDA cleared, for the use in ultrasound programs should be used. So in other words, if you have a probe, you should be using some type of sheath or protective cover so that if by chance there's a break in the skin barrier, there's blood, there's an ulcer, there's a perforation, a puncture, that a high-level disinfected probe is not coming in contact with that blood or that past the mucous membrane barrier. And that's on page 10. There's also single-use probe covers that can easily do, but it does not substitute, this is key, the replace for cleaning. You still got to clean and disinfect it because sometimes people, how do I want to say this? Technique is maybe not the best, or they can puncture the sheath or the cover, and now you still are exposed. So you want to make sure you're still cleaning the best because you just don't know what's going to be used. And that's when we talked about needle guides, because needle guides are very interesting because this is now critical. So most probes are considered semi-critical devices. So according to Spalding, it is not needed sterilization. But once it goes into puncturing the skin, it does now require sterilization. So what is we as people who process these know how they're going to use it. So that's where those probe covers and sterile covers really come into account. So make sure if you're processing these in your facility, you're working with the clinician partners and knowing how they're processing, how they're using them in the procedures. That's what that is about. And again, it's in the IFUs. It's also in this document. The next one, again, we talked about probe cleaning. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of scary stuff, as we've seen. And we know, I mean, I've gone into different stuff in auditing hospitals and walking around, even my own hospitals, where I go up to the floors where I know they have these probes and they got them in a drawer of a rollable cart that they move into the patient room. They use them. And I open up the drawer and I'm like, oh, it looks like underneath my kid's bed. It's like, what's going on here? So, and then I watch them do it and they just do a quick wipe and throw it in the drawer. That's not necessarily cleaning. You got to really physically remove the soil because some of these clinical areas like the ER, they're busy. They got to keep moving because they don't know when the next patient's coming in, but doesn't mean you cut the corners. So you might need to work with your leadership in your different departments to have these and provide some education. And this is where I think it's key is to provide education to these clinics who are doing some of the basic reprocessing steps like cleaning and or disinfecting that's not coming to sterile processing. Because not only are you educating them for the patient care, but you're also now building relationships with them. And that's the key thing to everything. That's the key thing to my job at HSPA. It's about relationships. So make sure your educator really does a good job at getting into these other departments and educating them. Not make it punitive, not make it, oh my God, you're doing this, you're terrible. But say, hey, here's what TIR 99 says, and show them the evidence. And the IFU says you should be doing it and help them. Help them do that. Provide this education for them. Now, I know if you're an educator like Brandon Gant, who's on the video today, I know he's kind of shy. He doesn't like talking too much, but you can make Brandon go out there and do the education. I know he'll go do it if he's really encouraged to. So sorry, Brandon, I got to get you too. I saw you on the thing. So, and then transport and storage. Transport and storage is also a very big important thing because transport and storage with these devices, they're not stored typically in a sterile processing area or even in a sterile area like a sterile core. They're stored in rooms or offices or you name it, you've seen it all. So as long as they're covered, as long as they're protected from contamination or anything else like that, you're okay. Again, these are intended for high-level, intermediate or high-level disinfection, depends on the probe. But you're okay, but protect them, cover them, contain them so that people can't get to them. Environmental surface, sun, dust, all that stuff can't get to them, and they'll be fine to be used. But it all talks about in this document too, which is really cool and really nice. So hopefully that helps you a little bit on the probe document, TIR 99. All right. Well, this is one of my favorite ones too, which is I'm kind of a geek. This is ST58, which is your chemical sterilization, high-level disinfection. What's changed this year is actually incorporated an ST41, which is an old document of ethylene oxide. So it's now incorporated in there. When it really expands the different stuff. So we're talking low temperature. We're talking your vaporized hydrogen peroxide, predominantly. We're talking high level disinfection. We're talking liquid chemical sterilization. So your peracetic acid, and we're talking about ETO or EO sterilization. It's all under this one document, which is really cool because it gives you that insight of what type of stuff we should sterilize and when we should sterilize it, how it works, all that good stuff, because there's different sciences between them. And there's a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but a lot of misinformation out on the market on IFUs and what, if it says, the IFU says I have to use, I don't want to say company X sterilizer, low temperature, or company Y, low temperature sterilizer. But if you look at a steam sterilizer, it just says on average, the temperature and the time. It doesn't say use company X, company Y. It says temperature and time. So what's the difference between a steam sterilizer that doesn't care about a company name, but in low temperature, they list the company name? And now the company cycle is very important, but the company name, not necessarily, but the company cycle could be very important to the sterilization of these products. So that's where this document helps cover some of those gaps in knowledge and helps you out there. Plus, you can also work with the manufacturers. And again, it's reconfigured to these two sections. And again, I can't even begin to tell you the difference between, high level disinfection and liquid chemical sterilization. It's all in this great document. So you really, if you're doing high level disinfection, so if you're a GI center or you do GI stuff, or you have a GUS station or I don't want to name any other station, but you have something where you're processing scopes or probes or anything else that's being liquid soaked, whether it's an HLD or a liquid chemical sterilant, is covered in this document, which is really beneficial to everybody. All right, now, excuse me, we're going to talk about what's currently under development. Now, we did say there's one that's moved, and which is really good because that's a good thing for us, because we want to move some of these documents along, because I'll talk about that at the very end. Because as we want to, what do you want to call it? Proceed with new documents and update older documents like ST79, we got to clear some runway. We got to clear some path. So we got to get these ones that are under development and get them moving forward. So good thing is, like I told you, this is new. It's finally out there. It's the external transport of medical devices. And what this means is, and this is where this started from, is I'll give you a great example is my facilities. I've got 3 facilities, or I had 3 facilities that I managed that were within, one's 14 miles and one's 20 miles. So if you kind of want to do a circle, we're all within 20 miles, 3 facilities. But if I had a sterile set of instruments that I sterilized in one of my facilities and I needed it at another facility, our policy, because it really wasn't covered, was to send it, but the new receiving facility had to open it, inspect it, wash it, re-sterilize it, and then prep it for surgery. Now, if the patient was on the table and it was an emergency, that was something different. We had a policy for that. But if we were just transferring instruments back and forth for next day cases, we had to reprocess it. And I'm like, why? This doesn't make sense. But there was no science behind it. There was no data behind it. And it was some of those knowledge that was just always done. Now, I'm talking from internal facility to internal facility. That's one instance, because these are the places that follow all the same policy. We have the same processes at all my facilities. So I can vouch for one process or another. We have tracking systems that can track from one facility to another. So it made it really easy for me to grasp my brain and my staff to grasp their brain around why we'd be able to do that. But I'll give you a good example. If you have and I'll just call it out, Medline pack, just say a laparoscopy pack, that goes from wherever they manufacture it via plane, via truck, across the country to a warehouse in your city or state, then from that warehouse to your hospital, to a warehouse, and to your hospital's receiving dock in a cardboard box to unpack it and bring it to your sterile storage. And now all of a sudden it becomes, the sterile storage has to maintain it, the sterility of it, then it goes to the OR. That's still a sterile pack. Why is that treated differently than a Synthi small frag set, where I washed it, inspected, refilled it, wrapped it, sterilized it, packaged it, and shipped it to one of my other facilities, and that was not covered, and I was stopped. No, you can't do that. That didn't make sense to me and a lot of other people. So we started working on this document a couple of years ago, and now we have it done to go, yes, you can transport these. Now, there's reasons you can and reasons you can't. There's also chain of custody. There's a lot of stuff out there. But we talked about this a lot because there's also a lot of centralized processing becoming more prevalent. So, for instance, offsite reprocessing. So there's offsite reprocessing facilities in about several states in the U.S. It's very prominent in the UK and in Europe. Here, not so much, just because of our geographic size and location. I mean, you couldn't have one thing in most states. You have to have them around your nub or your area of influence. But it is one of those things that makes very much sense that they're already doing it, but they're doing it under their own policy for their offsite central. There's no standard. So we created a standard to also loop them in, and we use a lot of their expertise to help develop this. We also talked about low temperature sterilization at one facility. So again, low temperature, I mean, if you think about things that typically go in low temperature sterilization are typically higher dollars. They're more capital items, whether they're your scopes, your probes, your glide scopes, whatever they might be more high dollar. So instead of like my 3 facilities, instead of all of them having 20 of these high dollar items, maybe, so that's 60 of them, maybe I can have 30 of them, and based off the use, I can transfer from facility to facility. You know, keep that hub down, keep the cost down to the patient, to the facilities. And if I can keep the cost down, then I can do more things for my patients. But also more importantly, I found the secret sauce that I can actually get more stuff for my staff. I can get more equipment, more capital, and more importantly, I can get more money. I was very successful in the time I was there that my sterile processing technicians are now paid as much and sometimes more, depending on their certifications, as scrub techs. So, but it is based off value. You can't just say, I do sterile processing, pay me more. You have to prove it with some return on investment. You have to prove it with good quality outcomes. You have to prove it with all these other things. And I see a topic, right? This has been a discussion with ASCs. ASCs, absolutely. This is a huge discussion. I had, again, 1 surgery center and 3 hospitals I oversaw. And absolutely, I would transfer stuff back and forth from my ASC to a main surgery because there are a lot of the same surgeons. So they'd work one day in the main hospital, one day in sterile processing. So it's in this document and it really will help you out. And again, then we talk about clinics. So again, one thing that we got inundated with was wound care clinic, you know, Dr. Smith's office. We got Colorado State University's office. I'm not kidding. At one point, I think I had 70 different clinics hitting one of my 3 facilities. And we had to track all those. And we were sterilizing and sending, but nobody seemed to care about that as much. But I couldn't send a small frag set to one hospital to another. That didn't make sense to me. So I'm glad to see this document out. It really will help you guys to know what you can and can't do. Now, it's not a get out of jail free card to say, I don't have enough instrumentation. I don't want to spend the money, so I'll just transfer stuff. If you truly need more instrumentation to take care of the patients, you still need to get that. And there is some logistic things you need to do, like how do you package it? How do you seal it? The chain of custody? How do you clean the container? That is, oh my God, we spend so much time talking about what do you call the transport container. Mind numbing. So yeah, if you attend these meetings, you're going to be like, Damien, how have you been doing this for 20 years without going crazy? Secret is I am crazy. That's why I love this stuff. So, but please, this document will help you if you do have issues with this kind of stuff. And as we know, we see crazy stuff like this. So areas to be addressed in the facilities are very simple. We're addressing the clean and sterile transport. So you can also transport clean and sterile, but we can also transport contaminated items. And what I mean by contaminated items that have gone through washer and disinfector and maybe not contaminated, or sometimes they are contaminated and they can transport. There's a Department of Transportation document. We transport lab specimens all the time. Hospitals do this all the time. So they already have the certification. They already have the know-how to transport, but you can't transport them with commingling. And then type of containers that we use. How's the vehicle done? Because it can't be a standard car with, carpet in the back. It's got to be washable. It's got to be cleanable. It's got to, all that fun stuff. Security items. I mean, there was conversations brought up of like, what if the driver wants to stop and grab lunch on the way? This vehicle's sitting out in the sun and in the Georgia heat. I mean, is that security at that point? What's it doing there? So all those are in that document. And then how do we document it? Because again, we got to track what we do. So again, if you sterilize it at one place, what's your biologicals done? What if you have a positive biological? How do you notify the receiving place that something happened? Even though that's such a almost non-occurrence, but you still have to have documentation in place to show that. And then tracking the items, because we know everybody's going to blame everybody. So if I lose this, or someone sends you something that's missing an instrument and you send it back with the same exact set, missing that one instrument, they're still going to blame you for it. So how do you track that? That's still going to be an area of contention for everybody. Luckily, we're getting better with technology at tracking that stuff, but it's a human nature to blame the other person, or maybe try to get some free stuff. Hey, I'll send them this. Hopefully they'll replace it with theirs and I'll be back full. And that's human nature. That's departments. It's not just sterile processing related, by the way, either. And then how do you prepare the items for transport? Again, that's a big one right there too, because it does take time. And unfortunately, most sterile processing departments productivity measures are based on items processed. So this actually will kind of help you a little bit, because if you now sterilize the item and ship it out, you get productivity count. If you just wash the item and you ship it out and someone's taking time to package it and do all this stuff, you don't get productivity for it. And again, that's not universal, but that's pretty standard in the industry. It's items processed. And the processing is defined as the final step of sterilization or HLD, whatever that might be. So again, by processing it in your facility and shipping it out sterilely, you actually get credit for it. By washing it, assembling it, inspecting it, and shipping it out non-sterile, you don't get credit for it. So then if you're not getting credit for it, you're doing all that work for nothing. Excuse me. Not for nothing, but we need to make sure we capture everything we do, because that's how we get staff. That's how we get funding. That's how we get capital. So that's what's important about this document. It really helps capture all that stuff. So I'm really, hopefully that'll sink into you guys. Now, what's really important is, I see a great question there by Tamika. Are they tracking temp and humidity during transport? That is in the document. Yes, that is. So that is a great question. So temp and humidity are a big thing to track and trace. We're also working on studies on vibration too, because you'd be surprised that vibration actually matters more than sometimes the temp. Humidity is a big factor. That's not a doubt. But temp is not a big factor. Like say in Colorado here, we're pretty cold. We're dry. We don't have humidity, but we have cold. And if something, say 40 degrees in a truck, 40 degrees is not going to make it unsterile. But that vibration of going over all the potholes and the snow and all that stuff could really, really impact the sterility. It could be banging around in there. It could be poking holes in the filters, which you've all seen. So there's studies being done on all that stuff right now. And I'm happy you brought that up, because that's one thing I wanted to discuss is the research needed on all these areas is being done right now in the field. So some of it is done and completed. It's in the document and there's stuff to be referenced, but there's other stuff out there that's really important, because it's also giving us a idea of where we want to invest research time and energy and funds in. And that's what another thing, I'll promote HSPA because that's what I do. Our foundation does research. There you go, Barry. Thank you very much for that. We do research and we want to find areas where there's gaps in knowledge and gaps in science, and work with the experts and fund the experts through our foundation to provide research to update the standards. So you'll be hearing more about that, especially at conference, but also in the next year. So we got an amazing foundation board that does great work on all kinds of charity stuff. I'll talk about that actually in a few slides here. All right. Well, I'm going to tease you on that. I'm going to go back here because I want to talk to you about something I didn't put in here, but I know it's very important to you. It's ST79. ST79, everybody wants to know what's going on with ST79. ST79 is open for revision. However, the document, we haven't dug into the document yet. It is a beast of a document to dig into. So Amy's leadership and, of course, the co-chairs, which are made of people like myself and other people far smarter than I am, sit around and go, we've got these other documents that are so close to being finished. If we start ST79, and it's going to take a lot of lift and a lot of effort, we need those minds in that document. But if we have all these other documents open and working on them, then there's a conflict, not a conflict, there's going to be a time conflict. You can't be in multiple documents at the same time because there's just not enough time in the day to do that. So we want to finish a few of these documents and then start ST79. We're also waiting on leadership to get assigned. So new co-chairs that need to be assigned to the document. And we really need experienced co-chairs, people who've been co-chairs in the past, people who understand the process. Not necessarily, they don't need to be SMEs in sterile processing. I prefer that because they can discuss that, but they also have to be almost SMEs in AMI and co-chairs. So there's a couple leading candidates right now, but once we get the co-chairs in place and timing in place, we're going to reopen up 79, and we're going to start digging into it and get some updates for you. But it still is going to be a couple of years before it's finished and out for you. But the good part is HSPA is very active in this. Our education team and myself are in every meeting, and we will keep relaying this to our members and give you regularly updates. I'm now going to start writing the update from it's up to its new name is Up to Standards in Process Magazine, and I'll be giving you updates on what's coming and going, stuff like that. So hang on an ST79, but there's still some good documents with the water out there, with a transport document out there, with a probe document out there. We're going to have some other cool documents coming out there, like the UV disinfections coming out there. There's going to be great stuff to do. So with that said, I'm going to transition really quickly to HSPA updates. So HSPA updates. So there's a couple things I wanted to update you guys on. We have new books. So if you don't know, we just published our brand new CIS book, which is very, very cool. It is, I'm not kidding you, it's that thick. It has got state-of-the-art pictures, modern, everything is in there, is up to date. And our team, our education team, took an amazing time going. We partnered with Rick Schultz a little bit on this. We brought in industry experts from different companies such as Intuitive and Stryker and Agility, and they've all helped us out with this. So if you are a CIS, this is also another resource for your library. If you're not a CIS, the good news is this book. Now, the certification will be updated in the next year or so. They're going through that process, but the book is out now. And then we have the Skills Builder set, which is on instrument inspection. So if you haven't seen it, it's a really nice little, what I call hip pocket book. It's something small. It's $20-something for members. And it's really nice because you can do some great training on there, and that's where you go. Global impact, what HSPA does. We're involved in ISO, International Standards Organizations, as I mentioned before. So we are aligning what we say, what we teach, what we promote, what we certify to try to make it as much with ISO and AMI as possible. So because we don't want to be saying something and then everybody else around the world says something different. And how we do that is we work closely with our international associations. Like I said, I'm going to be speaking in Lima, Peru in June, and I'm going to be going down there as a keynote speaker for the Pan American Conference. So their association invited our association, and we're collaborating. Again, just because we changed our name from ISHM to HSPA and we lost the I, a lot of people are like, oh, we're not international anymore. No, we're probably more international now than we've ever been. So we're doing that. And then we talked about the World Federation of Hospital Sterilization Science. I'm actually lucky. I've been voted now for two terms, so now it'll be a total of 8 years, but I've been on for now 4.5 years as executive committee for the World Federation. So I work globally on harmonizing sterile processing standards, education, and guidelines for this. And the president of the World Federation will be at our conference. He's a dear friend of mine. I've known him for 10 plus years. So he'll be there. So I'll introduce anybody to Harry that you want to meet. If you haven't met Harry, he's a great man. And then next, I want to talk about our election 2025. It ends on Tuesday. So if you've not voted, if you are a member of HSPA, you have to be a member, please vote. Your vote matters. Your voice matters. So please vote. These are our next elected officials. As someone who served on the board and went through the election process, I know how important it is. So if you haven't voted, please, please vote. Next, I want to talk about a few things. HSPA chapters. I'm so excited for our chapters. I'll tell you right now, we have 4 provisional chapters that will move hopefully over to full chapters at conference, and 2 more that are in the wings waiting. And I got about 5 or 6 applications out there for new chapters in different states that we have never had before, and 2 new international chapters. So our new chapters and our stuff, the growth is amazing amongst our chapters. They're starting to get out there and do education like you guys are doing here in Georgia. I'm telling you, if I can clone Georgia chapter, your leadership, your chapter leadership is amazing. You guys are putting on amazing stuff. I wish I could be at the cruise. I've got a conflict because actually I'm traveling, I think overseas at that time. But you guys are putting on some amazing effort and pull. You are one of the model chapters that I tell other people to look for by putting on education, collaborating with your industry partners, collaborating with other chapters. You guys are doing great. So That's what's going on with our chapters, and it's just so exciting to see that, and I can't give enough shout out to your chapters. And then lastly, as we talked about, I'm going to give you a little teaser here. We got our conference coming up April 26th and 29th in Louisville. Most importantly, I'm the manager of the foundation. The foundation is going to do two things this year, which is really cool. This is you are the first to see this. I'll tell you that right now. That is our new pin for this year. So 2025 supporter of our foundation. This is how we raise funds. We're a nonprofit foundation. It's separate than HSPA board. We raise funds so we can do great things like research, our scholarship foundations. We're sending 11 people to conference this year. Our Betty Hanna education, we spent $5,000 paying people's education, their postgraduate and undergraduate. We're also doing all kinds of stuff, but what's important, we love to give back to our community. And here's the teaser for you. On Saturday, between 9 and noon at conference, we have Build-A-Bear coming to our conference. And Build-A-Bear, we're going to have 150 bears there that we're going to build, we're going to dress, we're going to do a heart ceremony where you put a heart in the bear and they go in these little cuddle boxes. And I've worked a deal out with the local children's hospital, and we're going to be donating these 150 bears to the local children's hospital to give them to the kiddos there. So it's just a great way to give back to the community from the foundation and our sponsors, which actually Solventum is one of our sponsors this year, but we're giving back. So Build-A-Bear is an amazing thing. Could you imagine someone a little kiddo in a hospital going through all that they're going through, and now